Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC, or Certified Life Coach Collective, an ICF-accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. The topic for today is something called somatic coaching. It's a different style of coaching, and not everyone is familiar with it, although with more and more emphasis on body-based approaches, trauma-informed coaching, and things of that nature. Thankfully, it is gaining more traction. So I'm going to go over what it is and give some examples of how you could use it in your coaching practice. First, I'll start with a little bit of background. When people think of life coaching, they typically picture more traditional cognitive behavioral coaching techniques. So essentially, with cognitive behavioral approaches, you're looking at how someone's cognition or thinking impacts their behavior and how their behavior also impacts their thinking. So if someone is thinking things that are really negative, it's more likely to predispose them to take negative actions or actions that are counter to what they actually want. If somebody's thinking negatively, for instance, about a social event, I don't know if I want to go, I won't even know anyone, nobody will even like me, then they're less likely to go to the social event. But if they want more connection in their life, they probably need to go to social events, because not going to the event certainly is going to make it less likely that they're going to meet people that they really connect with. So, cognitive behavioral techniques are really what people tend to think of with coaching. You're working with the client's thoughts, you're using frameworks around rewards and around consequences. And of course, for everything I say on the Craft of Coaching podcast, I'm always open to other perspectives. I'm not here to debate anyone. I'm sharing based on experience of what I see in the coaching industry. You take what you like, you leave the rest. I'm going to use relatively simple definitions here to keep it clear for listeners who are new to coaching or looking to grow their coaching skill set. So this traditional coaching approach is very cognitive behavioral. If a client says, I'm feeling overwhelmed, cognitive behavioral coaching might involve making a list of stressors, identifying core values, and removing aspects of life that don't align with those core values that are leading to those stressors. It might include intrinsic rewards, like feeling more spacious, or external rewards, like taking a weekend trip after making some kind of progress or hitting some kind of big milestone. In some coaching approaches, there's an introduction of consequences for continuing to engage in behaviors that would keep you in the same place. That's not what I tend to use, but I have done it before. I had a client once where we determined that she was not as motivated by doing things that would get her what she wanted, but she was very motivated by the idea of giving herself a consequence that if she did not do the thing that she knew was going to lead to her growth and ultimately serve her, then she was going to make herself donate to the political party that she really did not like. So personally, I find consequences uninspiring. They can motivate behavior, but I prefer vision-based approaches. And at the same time, I'm always there to support what the client needs and wants. And I just remember that particular client. That was where she went with it. And it worked for her. She actually took some pretty profound steps forward after she set that consequence for herself. Now, somatic coaching is different. And it's not that there's nothing cognitive or behavioral involved in somatic coaching, but somatic coaching emphasizes the processes that are happening in and around the body. And I'm going to get into examples of that today, because you might be thinking to yourself, what do you mean? Like, what are you doing in a coaching session if you're emphasizing the processes happening in and around the body? All right, so I am using the term somatic broadly here. Somatic means of the body. And there are various somatic modalities or coaching and therapeutic modalities that use somatic techniques. I can name a few. The Hakomi method, Hakomi. Process work by Arnold and Amy Mindell, Mindell. The Strozzi Institute, Strozzi is Strozzi. And as I talk about somatic coaching today, I'm not following any one of these somatic approaches specifically. I'm rather going to talk more generally about any coaching method that intentionally includes the body as part of the process. So let's get into an example. It's one of the most effective ways to really learn and understand a concept. And so I'm going to go back to an example of overwhelm. Earlier, I gave an example with overwhelm of how maybe a cognitive behavioral technique would approach overwhelm. But with this same example of overwhelm, a somatic coach or a coach taking a somatic approach would not just ask the client, let's go through your to-do list and see how it aligns with your values, and, collectively then work with the client to start to remove things from their to-do list that don't align with their values and therefore lead to overwhelm. Instead, a somatic coach might start with a question like, when overwhelm hits, how do you know that you're overwhelmed? And that might sound kind of odd at first, because at least for me, when I first began to engage in somatic work, it felt like, well, what do you mean? How do I know I'm overwhelmed? I'm overwhelmed. But if you slow down with your client and help them to really unpack a question like this, it's powerful. So I'll give myself as an example. For me, overwhelm often shows up as tightness along the back of my shoulders, having trouble sleeping. I might feel kind of mentally foggy, but oddly, and I could only identify this through somatic coaching work, with a kind of swirling energy in front of my forehead. And that's part of how I would describe the fogginess. It's like the thoughts are there, but they're kind of just swirling around and don't really land so that I can grasp onto them and do something with them. That's my experience of overwhelm. But if you unpack this question, you might be completely different. Someone else might feel a churning stomach. Another person might find that when they're overwhelmed, they want to sleep more, not less. So we each register overwhelm differently. And so a somatic coach taking this approach of, when overwhelm hits, how do you know that you're overwhelmed, is really presenting an invitation to the client to go deeper into what the messages are, the signals are that are being sent by the body. And we start to offer examples of somatic coaching techniques throughout our CLCC program, although we do have a major concentration in somatic coaching where you can really go deeper on somatic coaching. And the reason that we do that is because anything we can do as coaches to guide a client to notice what's going on for themselves and their bodies is going to give the client more data points for decision making and for really identifying what feels right and true for them. So if a client starts to talk about overwhelm and the coach guides them to notice, for instance, where it lives in the body, that's what we call an entry point, a somatic entry point. From there, the coach can support the client around accessing even deeper layers of experience. What's going on in the body? If you gave that part of you words, what would it say? And that's without needing to fix, that's without needing to solve. And really, I think it's important to note that if you want to incorporate somatic coaching techniques into your coaching, this doesn't mean that you necessarily have to relabel yourself as a somatic coach. Right? You can use powerful coaching techniques without necessarily redefining yourself that way. Now, you might be wondering, but why would I use somatic coaching? Well, it's pretty simple. Not all clients respond to strictly cognitive behavioral approaches. Some people process through their bodies. They don't actually start with thoughts. They start with sensations. And in our verbal, fast-paced culture, Many people have never been encouraged to listen to their bodies. I've worked with clients before where I wanted to help them with some cognitive reframing. They had perhaps an inner critic that was very mean to them. And yet, when we tried to isolate what exactly the inner critic was saying, they found that they were struggling to put words to what the critic was saying, but they would say things like, well, I can't quite put words to it, but I notice that when I think of my inner critic, I know it's there because I feel this. So there are clients who maybe don't necessarily always articulate their process. Sometimes they purely feel it. Some clients have more of a feeling state that they need to go through before they can articulate things. And other clients have been so in their cognitive behavioral process. They're high at articulation. They can say all the things and they show up to coaching. And if you say to them, thinking that you're going to help them unpack something, well, what is it you notice you want? They can give you like an essay on what they want and why they think they've got some pattern that's due to childhood, and then this happened, and this is why they're stuck. They can overly articulate, frankly, all the reasons why their life is the way it is, but they have trouble with feeling. They have trouble with slowing down. Or they can do all the right things on the checklist, but in their bodies, they don't feel good. What do you do to help those clients where they know all the things, but they don't feel good in their lives? That is something we want to shift. Somatic awareness is really what we're aiming for in somatic coaching. And somatic awareness is, I assume other people have used this term. It's what I have labeled the term as the ability to essentially check in with your body and interpret what your body is telling you. It's the ability to know what tight shoulders mean for you or a churning stomach means for you. And it's different for every person. For one person, a churning stomach might signal excitement, an anticipatory excitement that's about, oh, okay, I'm super nervous, kind of like being at the top of the roller coaster where it's like, I got on the roller coaster, I know it's going to be fun, but oh my God, I'm at the top and it's kind of scary. But for another person, a churning stomach is like, this is a red flag. This is a sign, and I know from past experience that this sign means I should not proceed forward. The key is that the client knows what those sensations mean for them. So they essentially have that somatic awareness. Again, going back to the highly cognitive people, the people who would describe themselves as overthinkers, overanalyzers, the people who can often be very adept at articulating. Highly cognitive people, they benefit from somatic awareness. I would consider myself one of those people. I've got the ideas. I can talk fast if I need to. Very analytical. Some people would say too analytical. But even I have made huge leaps in my personal work thanks to somatic work, because having that ability to stop and ask, what am I actually feeling right now? What does it really mean? When I have had one of those problems, those sticky problems in life where I could go left and I could go right, and there are benefits if I go left and there are consequences, and there are benefits if I go right and there are consequences. What do I do? Should I do this? I've talked to all the people. I've consulted my zodiac chart. It's like, hold on a minute. Actually, in those moments, what I most need is self-trust, and I am not going to get self-trust, and your clients are not going to get self-trust from something outside of themselves. They're not going to get self-trust because so-and-so told them, here's your 3-step plan of the right thing to do. Self-trust is built by going into the self. So that ability to stop and ask what's really going on in my body right now is powerful. And when we incorporate somatic coaching, we help clients to deepen their self-trust. That's a place where they then can process stuck emotional patterns and access more clarity and move forward with more groundedness. In fact, that processing of stuck emotional patterns, I find, is really crucial when you get one of those clients who comes to you and they say, hey, so I've gone to therapy, I've gone to coaching, I've read the books, I've journaled, I've taken walks, I've focused on what I can be grateful for, I've tried putting up boundaries, and I am still mad at my mom. No matter what happens, I can't get out from under being mad at my mom. You have literally just heard someone, if anybody ever gives you that speech, you have literally just heard someone who has told you all the cognitive things that they have done to try to shift something in their life. And what are they left with? A challenging feeling. But I'm still mad at mom. The mad. It's a feeling. And that client might need to process emotions somatically in the container of a coaching session. With crying, with role play, sometimes with just silence and just being with a coach who is not going to judge them for being angry, who's not going to gaslight them about why they shouldn't be angry. That person might have come from a family where people were doing that. And if there's any part of you that's going, oh, no, coaching is not supposed to be about feelings. Well, that's a very outdated idea. I have been preaching this since I first became a coach, that coaching does deal with feelings. Coaching does not deal with diagnoses. That is for therapy. But coaching does deal with feelings because humans have feelings. Have you ever gone 24 hours without an emotion? Because I haven't, and I don't know anyone who has. And I mean, I've heard, I don't know for sure, but through direct experience, but I've heard that people who are sociopaths and psychopaths actually have difficulty feeling any kind of emotion. But, that's not a life path that I want for myself. I don't think it's what you want for you. So essentially, somatic coaching, as we teach it in CLCC, makes space for metabolizing emotion, which is when you feel your feelings and you metabolize it the way you would metabolize food. You take the nutrients from the food and you let go of the stuff you don't need to take with you. You metabolize emotions in the same way. You take the nutritive aspects of the emotion and then you let go of the rest. So crying in a coaching session, yes, it happens. And by the way, when I first started as a coach ages ago, I personally, when I was in the client seat, had this very hard divide between the two. And it was very quickly actually processing of emotion and having a space with a trusted person who can help me to process that emotion is really valuable. So if you are feeling skeptical about the idea of emotions having a place in coaching work, it's possible you might be the person who needs it the most. When clients engage with somatic coaching techniques, they are assisted in releasing pent-up emotions, and then they arrive at clearer thinking. If you've ever had a good cry and then taken a deep breath and suddenly you just knew what you needed to do next, even if it was going to be hard, even if nothing about your situation had changed, but you had that good cry, you took a deep breath and you're like, okay, I got it. I know what I need to do here. That would be a great example of somatic processing and how it's beneficial. Now, I do want to add a couple of disclaimers, particularly around trauma. I do not believe that coaches should do trauma coaching. Every single person on the planet has some degree of trauma. So I'm not saying you can't work with a client who has ever experienced trauma, because raising my hand here too, we all have. But trauma coaching with someone who knows that they have PTSD or CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, clients who have eating disorders, who are being abused, who were abused by their parents and are for the first time opening that up. I do not believe that it is ethical for coaches to do trauma coaching. Trauma informed, all about it. To be informed about how trauma works and to be aware of how it shows up in sessions, all about it. But I do not believe that coaches should hang up a shingle saying, hey, I'm a trauma coach. And my reasoning for that is because I have seen too many people with surface level training go into spaces they are not prepared to hold. I have been on the aftermath of hearing about a trauma coach or someone who wanted to be a trauma coach or was offering trauma coaching who re-traumatized her client and did something highly unethical. I have been on the coaching end of holding space for clients who have worked with trauma coaches or people who were calling themselves trauma coaches, and they were re-traumatized by that experience. If someone is actively in a trauma state or actively trying to process trauma, the position I take is that they need to be working with a licensed mental health provider. Now, can coaching be supportive as a complement to therapy? For sure. But healing trauma, doing trauma work in an active way, that is not what coaches should be doing. And I throw down on this because the difference between coaching and therapy is significant. Therapists have thousands of additional training hours with a much broader subset of clients than coaches are getting experience with. Often coaching is described as you're working with the worried well, people who have a lot of anxiety and stress, but they are basically functioning in their lives. Therapists also have oversight. If they do things like this example I'm giving you of someone who was calling themselves a trauma coach, and they were like, I'm going to heal sexual trauma, and they slept with a client. They slept with a client, y'all. And when somebody is going out and they're doing things like that, there's no recourse for them doing something like that. There's no punishment. They just move on with their lives and nobody knows except for anyone they've told. And like, I have knowledge of it, but like, who would I quote unquote report them to? So therapists have a board of behavioral sciences that they report to. Additionally, therapists have much broader networks that they can tap of other qualified licensed mental health professionals with experience in trauma if a client is not responsive to what they offer. Coaches do not have those same sorts of networks. So trauma informed, love it, great. Please be trauma informed, be aware of how trauma impacts people. But being a trauma coach, I don't support it. All right, let's get back into how to do somatic work. Because when you're doing somatic work, even with clients who aren't actively trying to work through specific trauma, when you're doing any kind of emotional processing, when you're supporting a client in accessing the body, sometimes that experience of getting into the body or doing some kind of somatic work can hit a client's limit for capacity. So I want to give you some thoughts on how you can actively support clients when they are hitting capacity. First and foremost, you need to make sure that you are getting permission from your clients before you engage in somatic work, essentially getting consent. What that can look like is explaining to the client that somatic work is one of the modalities that you have some training in. Hopefully you're going to get training in somatic work before deploying it to clients, and that this is a body-based type of coaching, and it has people tap into the sensations in their body, the things that they're feeling. And is this a process that the client would like to engage in? You might even describe why you're suggesting it as a modality. So to give the example I gave before of the client who says, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things, but I'm still angry at mom. You might say, when I heard you say, your list of all these things that you do or have done to try to heal that relationship, yet you're still feeling a lot of anger with mom, the thought occurred to me that maybe it could be helpful to do some somatic work around emotion and anger and tapping into the body around what you're feeling. And if somebody says, yeah, that sounds great, then fantastic. Make sure that you're approaching it, though, from a place of giving them lots of room to say no. I like to add things to these sorts of discussions when I'm getting consent from a client, such as, you're always in the driver's seat. If you say, that doesn't feel right for me today, we drop it, we move in a different direction. No worries. So first thing, very important when doing somatic work, is to get permission. And the reason it's so important is because, like it or not, clients will often assign role power to the coach. Even if the coach has always said, you're in the driver's seat, even if the coach has always said, hey, anytime you feel like we're going down a different direction than you want to be going down, just let me know. get that consent again, because today is a new day and emotions feel very vulnerable. Next thing, as you engage in somatic work with a client, pay particular attention to the client's breathing. And I would say this is really even true for even non-somatic clients, like clients just in general. When the nervous system gets overwhelmed, the breath is the first thing that changes. So if your client starts to breathe in a way that's really ragged, if their speech breaks up, if you notice that they're trying to speak, but they keep kind of choking up from tears, give space for them to pause and get their breath back online. Bring them back into the present. That's the priority. And in fact, one of the things that we teach in CLCC for supporting clients with emotional states like this is we actually encourage all of our coaches to come up with what they call attention outs, or what we call attention outs, meaning taking your attention out of the current situation. So these attention outs, I suggest that you bring in some kind of a very, good, strong transitional statement. Let's imagine that a client's like, they're really, really crying. I like to not interrupt that process and just say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm here with you while you shed these tears. And, let me know how I can support you, but I'm right here with you. So I'm not trying to stop them from shedding tears. But let's say that I can hear in the breath that the tears are going to a place that is just extremely dysregulated, like more dysregulated than is probably helpful for the client. I don't want them to become so dysregulated that they are on the other side of that call, dealing with it alone, feeling really vulnerable. And so in that case, I might say something like, now that we've had a couple moments, I just want to pause and see, let's come back to the breath. Let's just come back to the breath. Can you take a breath in where it takes you 3 seconds to fully inhale and 3 seconds to fully exhale? And if a client was getting really, really dysregulated, I would work with them on an attention out question. So again, the process is first trying to let the client experience the emotions that they are experiencing. But if it starts to seem like they are extremely dysregulated, like beyond what they have a capacity to hold, I like to check in with them and say, can you give me a yes or a no? Do you want to continue to sit with some of what's coming up for you, or would you like to start transitioning out of it? And if a client, I've never had it where a client was unable to give a response to that question. If they did, I would immediately move to an attention out. And most of the time when a client is in that kind of a state, what they'll say is like, yeah, I'm ready to transition out. And I'll say something like, okay, I'm going to ask you some questions that might seem kind of odd, but they're designed to start to move you out of this experience. So first, what I'd like you to do is to start at the number 100 and subtract 5, then 3, then 5, then 3. So for instance, 100 minus 5 is 95, and 95 minus 3 is 92, and 92 minus 5 is, and that's like one way that I would do an attention out. So it starts to take them out of some intense emotions that have come up. The other thing I have done, and this has to be deployed very delicately, things like that, is I will ask a question. I remember when Obama was president, my attention out question was, do you think Barack Obama is a boxer briefs, tighty whities, or like full-on boxers kind of guy? And this usually would elicit like a laugh from the client. And I always would add something about, that's not a question I'm asking in order to be disrespectful to the process you've been in. I honor it completely. That's a question just to completely take you out of something that is so totally the opposite of the experience that you've been in. One of the powerful things about supporting a client to dip into their somatic experience and then come out of it is, to me, this. You can really reflect to the client, hey, look what you did here. That's kind of amazing that you were able to safely go into experiencing and processing some emotions and then safely step out of it. And you're okay. So Consent, very important. Knowing how to do an attention out or something that shifts the energy if it feels like it's a lot for a client, very important. Last thing that's very important with somatic coaching is making sure that you have a process that you can work on with the client for what they're going to do after the session. We don't want our clients to have an emotional hangover where they feel awkward and self-conscious about all the emotion that they expressed. We don't want them to not be able to go back into their work day or parenting or whatever they have going on outside of the session. So encouraging your clients to do things like, could you take just a walk around the block? 5 minutes usually that'll take. Could you drink a tall glass of water, like a big glass of water, splash some water on your face, but working with your client for what they can do to transition back into their life. And I also think it's really helpful and supportive of the client process with any kind of somatic work to let the client know that they might be thinking about the things that they discussed today with you. And if they are wondering later about, oh God, I can't believe I said that in a session, or I cried like a big baby, if they're having any judgments, you know what those judgments are that come up for your clients, that you have a way of letting your client know affirmatively that you aren't judging them, that you support them, that you're there for them, and that it's really normal for clients to have additional stuff to come up later. And of course, let them know how they can contact you if they need you. I think that's very important too. So, is there more to somatic coaching than what I'm talking about today? Absolutely. In the Certified Life Coach Collective, we integrate somatic approaches into our core training, but then we also offer the optional major concentration in somatic coaching that people can add. And the way I think of that is that the CLCC core curriculum is kind of like doing your general education coursework in college, and then declaring a major is a deeper area of study. So declaring a major with somatic coaching can become a deeper area of study. And we also have some other majors like executive coaching and health and wellness. But somatic coaching is definitely one of my favorites. I think that one of the things that happens for a lot of coaches is that when they feel like they've gone as far as they can go with a client, sometimes they start to wonder, okay, maybe it's the client, maybe they're the problem, but the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better. You could almost use the metaphor of building a house. You want a lot of tools if you're going to build a house. You don't just need hammer and nails. You need a lot of other stuff. So the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more you can support transformation for your clients, and especially if those tools are broader and beyond just traditional cognitive behavioral techniques. So that's my overview of somatic coaching for today. It's always fun to nerd out a little, and I hope it gives you something to think about in terms of how you show up as a coach and what you can offer to your clients. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, would you help us out and take a moment to give us a rating in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening? It really helps us get the word out to other listeners. And before you go today, would you like free resources to support your coaching journey? Whether you're considering becoming a coach or you want advanced coach skills training, access our coaching resource library at teamclcc.com. Again, that's teamclcc.com. Can't wait to connect with you. And again, thanks for listening.